Have you ever thought about scraping data from every single vendor and tool out there on the internet and being able to get bigger lead lists and overall more valid emails for your outreach campaigns? Well, watch this sheet fill up in the next 15 seconds. And my goal by the end of this video is that you will have duplicated the exact N8N JSON, dropped in your API keys, and set it to run while you work on something more important in your business. Now, if you don't know what a waterfall enrichment process is, I'm going to break it down for you very quickly. I'll be honest, most data vendors will lose 30 to 40% of the total amount of data that you could be getting if you were using a system that was using multiple vendors. So for example, here's what it would look like. Let's say we went to try to find data in Apollo.io. This is a known database for B2B email addresses. Now, what happens if Apollo does not have the data for the person that you were trying to find data for? Now, most people would give up here, but what you can do instead is just now go ahead and try to get this in another vendor. So let's say perhaps this time you were trying to get the data on FindyMail. So you'd come in here, FindyMail, and it turns out that FindyMail did have your data. Now, if you're advanced already, or if you know something about outbound, you know that you need to validate your email addresses. You need to make sure that they actually exist and they don't have very harsh spam filters. So then you would test this email address on another tool, such as UseBouncer, right? So you go to UseBouncer and you validate your data. But then what happens is UseBouncer tells you that this email is invalid. Now what happens is most people would once again give up here and lose on that data. But what you can do instead is you can come in here and you can try another vendor. So this time perhaps you're going after LeadMagic, and you went to LeadMagic, and this time they did have the email, and now you're going to go again and you're going to validate exactly like you did last time. So this time that you're validating it, you now got a valid email. So what do? You now go ahead and you upload it to your cold email campaigns. So for example, you might be using Instantly, you might be using Instantly or SmartLead AI, right? And so you uploaded everything to your campaigns. These are ready to run. Now, how does the system effectively work? Well, we're going to be using all of the API endpoints of every single one of these tools. And by the way, an API endpoint is simply saying that there is a way to push a button inside the tool from an automation. Have the automation push the button for you. And I'm going to show you how in this video. And it will automatically try all of the tools for you or your clients. And then you're able to push them into Instantly and SmartLead and keep on feeding your campaigns. Now, how does this entire thing here works? Well, today I'm going to show you the waterfall enrichment of contacts, meaning of valid email addresses. So the way that this machine is going to work, and I'm going to show you how it works in N8N in a second. As you can see on the screen, these are the N8N automations I'll be showing you on this video. What we're going to be doing is the following. So this is going to be our automation right here. And then we're going to feed the data from other tools. So perhaps what you're going to be doing is you're going to be getting data from LinkedIn Sales Nav, or perhaps you're going to be getting data from Apollo.io, just data about companies and people. Or perhaps you'll be getting data out of Google, or you're going to be getting data out of Google Maps. And so you're going to be stacking all of the tools you could be using. Maybe you're even doing lookalike audiences with tools like Panda Match, which, by the way, if you don't know what a lookalike audience is, put it very simply, it is a tool that is able to find companies that are similar to the ones that you input. For example, you input Microsoft and it will then find Dell, it will then find Apple, it will then find Huawei and etc. It will find similar companies. And the use of that is just in case you want to set up campaigns that target companies that are similar to your case studies. That is a fantastic cold email campaign, by the way. So then you're going to connect all of these tools to your automation, right? So every single day, these tools or your VAs will be filling up your automation with these sources. You can automate that part, or you can just have someone else do it for you. Now, once all of this is fed to your automation, it will do this waterfall enrichment process right here, and it will output it inside your sending tool, which will then automatically send your outbound emails. And this is a self-filling system that you can put in place in order not to have to look at outbound again. All you're going to have to worry about is if your campaigns are good, if your copy is working, and if things are relevant. But from there, everything runs on autopilot. So without further ado, let's jump into N8N and let me show you some of these automations. So this is going to be our automation. There are 3 steps to this automation, and I like to call them the base, where you're going to have all of your ops prepare. Then you're going to have the battlefield, where all of the operations happen. And then you're going to have your sub ops, which is going to be all of the sub functions that will be running. Now, why are we looking at all of these things separately? Let me actually show you. And this is borrowing from another presentation that I did on another YouTube video. But here's the thing. First, I want to tell you about why are we dividing things, and then I'm going to tell you about the platforms that I'm selecting for these automations. So first, why do we divide big functions? The reason for that is just so one, it doesn't overwhelm the server. Two, you're able to stop if ever there is an issue and you don't burn all of your data. Three, you're going to avoid a lot of glitches if you're dividing your function. So you have a base, you have your battlefield, and then you have your underground ops. And that is extremely important. Now, when it comes to choosing the automation to build this on, I like to go for N8N most of the time. And the reason why I like N8N is because N8N, if you download the software and you install it in a server that you rent, you don't pay per action or per execution or per time run, which means that you can scale your automations to infinity without adding extra cost. Or for your clients, they don't have any extra cost to keep on running this apart from the cost of the final softwares, meaning where they're getting their email addresses from. If I go to a server provider such as Vultr, which is the one that I use for this exact automation, you're going to see everything is hosted on Vultr. This is the tool. And then all I did is I just came here to products. I bought a data server. And from there, I have installed Ubuntu as the operating system, and then I have deployed N8N through the Docker. Now, why did I go for this crazy setup that I'm telling you right now? It's actually very simple, because Vultr was the only tool that I tested across the board that wouldn't crash every time I ran large amounts of data through N8N. So that is why Vultr. Why Ubuntu? It's because it's a lighter system, and I found that it works better with N8N. And now why the Docker to install N8N? That is because it just makes it very easy to install it. And if you're curious about how to do that, I'm going to link down below a video that will teach you exactly how to self-deploy N8N in your own server. Now, for the sake of this video, I'm going to go directly into N8N and show you the automations. Now, coming back here, why N8N in the first place? N8N was my platform of choice because it scales very beautifully without adding cost, and it is extremely exceptional for when it comes to running large amounts of data. It is able to process large amounts of data very beautifully, and I like that a lot. Now, if I were to compare it to Make, Zapier, or Clay, the only compare is going to be Make is a very stable platform. However, cost can bite you in the ass, and you will pay per execution that you're running on Make and the amount of memory that you're using for those executions. So if you're setting up hundreds of thousands of rows like we are with these automations, then, well, Make is not going to scale as beautifully as N8N would. But Make is a very good platform if you're starting out. And you know what's good about it? You could actually implement everything that I show you today from N8N inside Make. So don't be restricted to N8N just because that's what I'm showing you in this video. Now, if you were to compare all of those two tools with Zapier, Zapier is a very stable platform, perhaps the enterprise favorite because it is so stable. But the only problem is that the pricing doesn't really scale that well. You will be paying per action run, and that will cost a lot if you're running a lot of data at once. So always keep that in mind. But one other upside of Zapier is that it's very easy to delegate. And finally, I'll compare it to one of my favorite tools ever, which is Clay. Clay is just this extremely powerful spreadsheet. It's a spreadsheet where every column becomes a function. So you can have every column be a button pushed on another website. For example, you plug in a LinkedIn profile on the left, and then the column on the right is going to be going to Apollo to get the email. And then the column next to that is going to be FindyMail trying to find that email. And then it's going to be Zoom in for trying to find that email and etc. So Clay is a fantastic platform. It is very stable as well. I like it a lot. The only downside you may want to consider, and by the way, you can see even in their animations, they have a waterfall enrichment automation like the one I'm going to show you today. That is a blueprint inside Clay. You don't even need to do anything to set it up. You just copy the blueprint and it's done. And then you just choose the vendor order and you're good to go. But the only thing about Clay is that the cost doesn't scale as beautifully as N8N does, unless you're connecting to everything through HTTP requests. And then we're complicating a lot of the system, right? But pretty much what it means is you don't pay a Clay credit if you use an HTTP request instead. Nonetheless, let's come back to the tutorial. And today we're going to talk actually about N8N because it's a tool that we use for our own waterfall enrichment and a tool that I recommend if you're working with enterprise clients or anyone that wants to scale this, or if you want to put your campaigns on autopilot and pay the bare minimum possible to have them run. Now, let's understand what do we need to make this automation work. And it's actually very simple. You're going to have it at the very top, your input. And what is the input? So the ones that I like to use are LinkedIn profile URL. And another one that I like to use is domain URL plus first name. Okay, so these are the two ways that I start a waterfall enrichment automation. Remember, why am I starting with that? Because I'm already having a VA or another automation, in our case, another automation, going to LinkedIn Sales Nav, finding URLs, then going to Apollo and finding URLs, and then going to Google Maps and finding URLs, and going to PandaMatch and finding URLs, and going to Google and finding URLs for me. And so I'm going to plug all of that into my automation. So my input is now going to be either a LinkedIn profile URL, or it's going to be a domain URL plus first name. It could also be a LinkedIn company URL, etc. You choose what you want for the input, because all of these tools are very flexible. What happens from here is I'm going to first cross-check the data I might already have. Then from here, what I'm going to be doing is preparing the spreadsheet for the output. Then I'm going to run a machine gun. Okay, so what do I mean by run a machine gun? Let me put it here, run a machine gun. What I mean by that is that we want to run this data in bursts and not like a cannon. So it's a machine gun, not a cannon. Why did I repeat that? It's because it's very important that you keep that in mind. You don't want to run all of your data at once and risk there being a mistake and now you burnt a bunch of credits. You want to run it in bursts. And also, you want to do it that way just so you don't overwhelm your server and you create a bunch of crashes and collapses that could happen along the way. So I'm going to run my machine gun. Then I'm going to use all of the possible vendors. Extract data from all possible vendors. And from here, I'm going to validate this data. So let me put it right here. Validate the data. And then finally, I'm going to output the data. If you're turning this into an app, one thing I will mention to you that is extremely important is that you could be making everything into a front end, okay? So you could turn all of this into a front end, and it's actually very simple. You could be using tools such as Postgres for keeping your user up to date with what's happening in the backend of the automation, and you could create an interface in a tool like Retool or Supabase or Bubble. Okay, so you would choose. You can use either or of these tools for the front end. You could use Postgres as the backend engine just to keep the user updated with what's going on. Now, let's jump into the automation and let's start building it. So what we're going to be doing first is the base. The base is once again our machine gun. Instead of running everything through a cannon, we want to run it through a machine gun, run it in bursts. So let me go ahead and make a copy of our own live automation. So this is going to be YouTube example. And let's work through it from the very beginning. First thing that we want to do is have a trigger. So your trigger could be a few things. You could be watching your Google spreadsheet in a few ways. One, you could be looking at every time that there is a row added to your spreadsheet, meaning you will automatically enrich a row that came from another automation or from a VA. Or what you could be doing instead is just putting a time trigger, right? So how would that work? You would come here and you click on schedule trigger, and then you'd put that once a day at midnight, you would want this automation here to get started. And when it gets started at midnight, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to go to a spreadsheet, such as Google Sheets, for example, and you're going to get rows in the sheet. Now, which rows would you be getting from the sheet? It would be all of the ones that you haven't yet enriched and that are new. So therefore, you would trigger this automation by every day checking if there is anything to be triggered. Now, what I'm doing in my case is I'm triggering this from another automation that is already bringing in the data from other vendors. So for me, I'm using the execute workflow trigger, which is triggered by another workflow, as it auto-explains. You could also be doing this through a webhook. So if you hit this URL, for example, it will then go ahead and trigger the automation for you. You can choose. I would strongly recommend that you start with the first one that I showed you. So it starts on a schedule and it goes to Google Spreadsheet. Now, this merge node that I have right here is just to take the input either from the webhook, either from the execute workflow trigger, or another trigger that I would like to add. So perhaps, let me see if I can go back. I could connect these two right here as my triggers as well. Okay, so I could trigger all of these right here. And I would choose whatever one of the three that is performing. And the way I do that is just by using the append mode with the number of inputs that I have in total. Then from here, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be getting, in my case, my Airtable record ID. Why am I doing that? It's actually very simple. It's because, as you can see on our Airtable, we have run so much data already, right? There's 536 lists that we have Waterfall and Enrich since the beginning of this year. These are all massive lists, and I want to come in here and I want to get all of the details for this list. So I want to be getting what is my ICP for this list. I want to be getting who is the client that I'm building this for, and etc. So that is why I start by getting a record ID. So I get the record ID, then I go to Airtable, and then I get all of the columns that I was mentioning to you. So then all that I want is to get in here, get all of the information that I need to then run the Waterfall enrichment. You can skip these steps, literally all of these right here. You could just do it like this, and you could go directly into the next step, which is going to start from here. So let's say this Google Sheet is this one right here. Now what you want to do is you want to get all of the data from the spreadsheet. So you want to come in here, get all of the data. Once you got all of this data, we need to perform a cross-check to see if our automation can actually run. Anyone that's running N8N like a pro is always cross-checking if the information they're adding is actually good before running the automation and breaking a bunch of stuff. So the first check we're going to perform is if there is a LinkedIn URL. Why? Because remember that I want to start from a LinkedIn profile URL. If you're starting with something else, you're first going to check if that column exists. So you're going to put here JSON, the column that you're looking to check, in my case, LinkedIn link, and you say that the string exists. That is all that you need to do. Now, if it exists, what we're going to do is we're going to continue. We're going to go to our filters. But if it does not exist, or if we got an error from Google Sheets, which, by the way you get this error node right here is if you click on the node, go to settings, and you put on error, continue using error output. This is how you can notify your front end about the error instead of having the workflow collapse. Now, if that happens and there is an error in the Google Sheet, or if the column does not exist, I'm going to notify my front-end user on Slack. So all that I say is there are no columns called LinkedIn link and or email. Go rename the columns and re-trigger the Waterfall enrichment automation. I'm telling my front-end user, in this case, our employees, what they need to be doing in case that happens. And I'm going to notify my front-end through Postgres. So that is very simple. All I'm doing is just telling my front-end that the Waterfall enricher stopped. And the reason for that is an issue with the sheets, right? So my front-end user knows what is going on. And then I stop and error the automation. I always like to use this just because I have another automation with an error handler where it saves a log on a spreadsheet of all of the errors that happen so I can figure them out later. Okay, if you want to know what that looks like, I'll actually show you very quickly. This is the one that I'm using. So it sends a message on Slack with the log, and it saves on Postgres all of the errors that are happening. And this is triggered once again by this node right here of stop and error. So it says error message, and it says an error was encountered, and it is forward to this other automation right here. Now let's continue. From here, I'm going to do two filters. So the first one is actually going to be, and I have an inverted order here. I first check if there's already an output, and then I check if there's an input. But let's talk about input first. So I am filtering if the LinkedIn link is not empty. So meaning I'm only want to keep rows where the LinkedIn link is not empty, meaning that it has an input. Then I'm going to perform another filter, which is if the final output does not exist already. In my case, that is a column called final email. And if that does not exist, then I'm going to run the automation. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take these two filters and create a node where if they don't have any data, meaning if I already finished running the Waterfall enrichment, I'm going to notify my front-end user that I already finished running because there were no data to be run through. And I'm going to notify them on Slack. So again, we finished running the Waterfall enrichment and there weren't any companies to enrich. And I'm going to stop the automation, okay? Because there was no data. If there was data to run, meaning there are rows that we can run. So for example, let's look at our data right here. It has rows to run because we have LinkedIn URLs in here, right? We have LinkedIn URLs. Then it's going to get started. When it gets started, first thing it's going to do is create the new columns. I do that by using a set node, and I create all of the columns that I want to have at the end of this automation. So I'm going to want to have final email, email status, vendor, and quality. So email status means if it was valid, if it was catch-all, or it was invalid. Vendor is the tool that I got it from, and quality means it's okay or good. And this is the final output from Million Verifier or Use Bouncer. Okay. Then I'm going to create that in the Google Sheet. So I'm going to say is I want to go to my Google Sheet. I want to update row. I want to map automatically the columns. And this only works because my previous field is a set field. So it's going to take everything from there and it's going to plug them into the spreadsheet and end up creating a new column. And then of course, I'm going to put handling extra fields in input. as insert as new columns. And that's all that you have to do. Now, bear in mind that this is very important right here, column to match on. This has to be a column that already exists in the spreadsheet. In my case, I'm always going to have first name in my spreadsheet already. That is coming from here, right? So I'm already going to have the first name that came from the other sources. And that is what I'm going to match the columns on. Once that is done, I'm going to start my machine gun. This is our machine gun node. It's called Split in Batches Advanced. I use the advanced node. It's one that you can get in the community. So you can look up on Google how to install Split in Batches Advanced on N8N. It's very simple. All you have to do is open a community, click install, and you're done. So you're going to do that. And then I'm going to have my machine gun. So I want my machine gun to shoot 30 bullets per round. Per round, meaning shoot 30 bullets until they hit something. Then shoot another 30 bullets until they hit something. Then shoot another 30 bullets until they hit something. I don't want to shoot it like a cannon. I don't want to put all of my data because I'm running millions of records per month on N8N, and I don't want to run a million records at once. I'd rather run 30 at a time so that I don't hit any API limits. I don't collapse my servers. And I overall have a higher likelihood of not breaking something. So I'm going to do that, split in batches. And then here's how I want to proceed. Now I want to send my bullets to the battlefield. The way I'm going to do that is through a sub workflow, which you can trigger in two ways. You can put execute sub workflow and you use this one, so execute a sub workflow, or you can call it through an API, meaning you can create your own API and call it through a webhook. That is what I'm doing in this case. So I'm using HTTP request GET. The URL I'm putting here is the URL of the next automation that we're going to talk about, which is this one right here, is this URL that I'm having in the webhook. So I'm creating a webhook in another flow. I'm copying the production URL from here, and I'm pasting it in my machine gun. Then I'm going to send it the fields that it needs, and only the fields that it needs to process this automation. In my case, I'm sending it the email, I'm sending it the LinkedIn link, the sheet URL, and the row ID, so that it's able to have everything it needs to then update the results in the final sheet at the end of processing. So that is all that I'm sending, and I'm putting a batching system right here at the very bottom. I click options, I click on add option, and I'm putting batching. I'm putting one item per batch with a 200 ms batch interval. That is just to make sure that I don't hit any API limits once again. So I always use this one. Timeout, I keep it to 300,000. I don't want to put any low numbers here in case the tools are acting a little bit slow. So I always put a very high number right here for the timeout. Once that is done, we are good to go. One other note, I always put on the retry on fail. So it tries at least 2 times with 5,000 ms of waiting time in between, just to make sure that it gave its best shot to make sure that it works. In case there was any small errors, I always do this right here. And then from here, I'm going to explain first our end of the base, and then we go into our battlefield, okay? So I triggered the battlefield. The battlefield ran, okay? So you don't need to look at the nodes yet, but the battlefield ran, and it returned to the webhook the final output, right? So it returned everything that it needed. Now what is going to happen is for the 30 bullets that I shot, I'm going to process the data from the 30 bullets. I'm going to get the final email, the vendor, quality, row number, and email status. And I'm going to upload everything to Google Sheets. Okay, why am I doing it that way? And why am I not updating the Google Sheet from inside the battlefield? The reason for that is actually extremely simple. If you try to get all of the data added row by row from the battlefield, you will inevitably hit an API limit. And I know I keep coming back to API limits, but that's because it's that important. And so what you want to do instead is you want to batch all of your processing and then upload in batches. Okay, so I'm uploading 30 at a time to Google Sheets to make sure that I don't hit any API limits. And this is the automation that I'm running. I'm matching everything to the row number and mapping the columns automatically because they all have the same name. And then I'm notifying my front-end user right here on Postgres. Again, I'm just sending, hey, we ran 30 records, or in this case, I even say 10 records. It's actually supposed to be 30. So then once that is done, it will shoot another 30 bullets right here. So it will go 30 bullets at a time until it finishes running all of the bullets that came out of our spreadsheet, all of the rows that came out of the spreadsheet. And what it's going to do then is update my Airtable commando saying that the list is done. So for you to have an idea, this is what it's going to do. It's just going to say that the status right here is done. And once that is done, it will notify us on Slack, hey, this is finished running, this is the final list output. It's going to notify my Postgres that, hey, this is all done, and it's going to respond to the webhook. In my case, it's responding to a webhook at the end because it was responding to that original trigger that I had that was a webhook. In your case, you could just end the automation here. So you could just come here, put a note that is do nothing. No operation, do nothing. And when you put that, the automation has ended successfully, okay? And that is all that you need to consider. Where does this go? Oh, it went right here. And I actually broke something right there. Okay? But that is it. Now, this is our base. Now we're ready to start shooting everything and process all of the automations one by one. So let's get into that. The way we're going to start it is through a webhook in a specific case, or you can use the execute workflow trigger or any other trigger that you would like. It could even be starting from the Google Sheets. But again, that might hit a few limits. And then the first thing I'm going to be doing if I'm doing a successful waterfall enricher is check if the data I already have, if I do have it already, is good already, meaning I don't need to run this automation for the data. When you're already getting data in the beginning from Apollo.io, or in this case from Apollo.io, and you might have an email that is valid, you don't know. And so you want to check that first. And if there is an email, first thing you're going to do is a check. I do a check with Million Verifier. So I'm going to their API endpoint, and I am checking if the email there is already valid. Now, here's what's important. Right now, I'm going directly to Million Verifier to do that, but you will see that in the next modules, I'll be doing an underground ops that does that check on Million Verifier for me. We're going to come back to that. So in this case, I'm just going to Million Verifier, and I'm sending it all there. How do you get this API endpoint from Million Verifier? Is actually very simple, and I'm going to show you. All that you do is you open your own Million Verifier account or use Bouncer or any other validation software that you use. You go to API, and then you just copy this information. So I'm looking at here. I have this API endpoint right here. I have this header that I'm sending, which is my API. And then I have my email, which is the one that I want to validate, and the timeout period, which is how long I want to wait for this final output. So all I'm going to do is copy and paste all of that into N8N. Here's a hack, by the way. You can click here on import C URL. So if you go to the API documentation of the tool, whatever tool that you're using, they will usually give you a C URL for you to copy. So in this case, let's say I'm using the single API, verify if an email address exists. I'm going to click in C URL, and I'm going to just copy the C URL right here and paste it inside N8N. When I paste it in here, it already has everything that I need. And I click import, it will import everything. All I might need to change is my API, and I might need to change what is my input for the email, for example, which in this case, I'm taking the email that is coming out of the webhook. Okay? That is all. That is all you need. That is how you do that. Now, once we've validated from Million Verifier, if the email is invalid, it will then run again on another tool to try to find it. What we're doing here is simple. We are now looking at this. So I got the data from Apollo, and so let's say I got it from Apollo. And then I tried to check it with Use Bouncer. Use Bouncer said it was red, meaning it was not valid. Now it's going to go and try another vendor. So what you're seeing in automation is it tried to validate the data in Million Verifier. It wasn't valid. Now it's going to run it on Prospeo. Okay, we're going to get to Prospeo in a second. What happens if Million Verifier had an error? What I like to do is I like to wait for 5 seconds. And then I would like to retry Million Verifier if I haven't run it already 2 times. So if I say that my run index was less than 2, meaning I haven't run it 2 times already, I'm going to run Million Verifier again to try and get the final data. Now, if that didn't work, I'm going to respond to my webhook saying that there is an API error, stop the automation, there is a problem with my validating tool. Now, if it was successful, I'm going to then check again if this email is invalid, and if it is invalid or if it is an error, I'm going to run it through the next tool, which in this case is Prospeo. So now I'm going to Prospeo's API. I'm using the social URL enrichment, and I'm going to send it my API key. I'm going to send it my URL to Enrich, which is my LinkedIn link, and I am good to go. Now I'm going to batch the items. Although I don't need to, I'm going to still batch them by 5 items every 2,000 MS. Okay, this is just to make sure I don't hit any API limits. How did I get this API URL here for Prospeo? It's very simple. All I did is I came on Google, I put Prospeo API documentation, right? And when I searched that, I got the API documentation, and then I just looked at the way that I want to enrich, which was social URL enrichment API. Remember that the hack that I gave you, you can just copy the C URL from here and go into N8N imports URL, and paste it, and then you're done. All you do is change your API key from there. Well, that is exactly what I did, and that is what I recommend that you do too. From here, Prospeo is going to return me a few things. And if you look at their website, you're able to see what it returns. It will return, if it was not an error, it will return all of this data right here. So all I have to do is process this data in the way that best suits me. So in this case, the way I'm going to handle it is by checking if the email that it got me is valid. So I'm going to send it to my underground operations to cross-check. Let me cover the underground operation. The underground operation is, as soon as I send it from the other flow, meaning I trigger this webhook right here, I am going to get the email from Million Verifier, same API endpoint that we hit before, exactly the same thing. And then I'm just going to judge it. If there was an error, I'm going to run Million Verifier again. You already seen how to do this. If it did not have an error, I'm going to just return the final status, whether that's going to be that it's valid, whether that's going to be that's invalid, or etc. Once I return the final result from Million Verifier, I'm going to judge it again. If Million Verifier failed, meaning the email was invalid, okay, or not found, I'm going to then send it to FindyMail. Remember, let me show it again. Last time I'm going to be showing like that. If it failed from FindyMail, for example, I'm going to send it to the next tool. In this case, it failed from Prospeo. Let me put Prospeo. And then I'm going to send it to the next one, which in this case is going to be FindyMail, right? So that is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be sending from one to the next. And from there, I am going to run the same automation, which is a FindyMail check this time. And if there was an error of FindyMail, it will again send it to the next tool. And if there was an error of the next tool, it will send to the next tool. If no email was available, send to the next tool. If an email was available, send it to my underground ops that will cross-check if the email is valid or not. Okay? So that is everything that you need to do. And at the end, you're going to return the API to the original base. To every 30 leads, just save the data in Google Sheets. We now have a machine that is able to get a bunch of emails from a bunch of different vendors for a very low cost and not paying per execution. Now, what happens is if you don't want to save it in Google Sheets and you want instead to upload everything into Instantly, let me show you how you accomplish that with a new automation we're going to build together. So let me create that for you. Let's call this upload leads to Instantly AI. The way you're going to do it is very simple. I recommend that you put a time-based first step. So we come in here and we say a trigger on schedule. It's right here. I want you to do it once a day at midnight every single day. And then I want you to go to my Google Sheet. So I'm going to go to Google Sheet. I'm going to get rows in the sheet. And the rows that I'm going to be getting are going to be, so let's put the list here. I like to select always by URL. So I'm going to select the URL of the list that we already have. So let's say it's this one right here. Make sure that you're always copying the URL from the browser and not from the share tab. What that means is you copy from the browser and not from the share tab right here, okay? And then I'm going to paste it in both. So then I'm going to select the columns. What I want to have is I want the email, or in this case would be final email, to be present. So then I'm going to say that my final email exists. To keep this very simple and not just give you like copy paste stuff, but actually teach you how to think, I'll tell you how you would get the value to put in here. The way you want to do that is through ChatGPT and a specific bot trained on how to use N8N. So let me show you how to do that. We'll come to ChatGPT. You would then come here and you click on Explore GPTs. You're going to search for N8N and you're going to take this one right here. This one by the N8N community. This, okay? You're going to start the chat and then you're going to say, hey, this is what I have. Look at this. I'm going to just copy that. And then you're going to say, I have this node in N8N and I want to filter only for columns in G Sheets that have an email available. What should I add to the value field? And this is exactly how you're going to be able to get that done for you. Again, teaching you how to think instead of just giving you the answers. And this is exactly what you need to put. So then we come back in here, we select expression, and we are going to paste that right there. So whenever it's not empty, meaning that it has an email already, we're going to continue. I'm going to add another field, which is if it wasn't uploaded already. So ideally, you want to go to your spreadsheet. You want to come in here. You want to go to the very end. You want to add a column. Let's put it here, which is added to campaign. Okay. And then this is going to be filled with yes, and empty, right? So you're gonna now set up a filter which is added to campaign equal empty. And only then it will copy this lead and it will send it to the automation. So you're gonna do that for the other column. Then we're gonna combine the filters. That's all good. So then here we go. I actually removed the filters just for this example. And then we're going to take all of these emails that he got and we're going to process them, sending them to instantly. Again, you don't want to do everything at once. Don't think of this like a cannon. Think of it like a machine gun so you don't hit any API limits. So I'm going to again do a split in batches. I like to split in batches advanced. I'm going to do a batch size of 30. How do you know what's the best batch size for you to use? You actually check the API documentation from the final tool. So let's do that real quick. We're going to search on Google Instantly AI API documentation. We're going to go to their documentation, and I will look for any type of limits in here. So let's just see if we can find any. And in this case, it wasn't in here. So what we would search instead is in the introduction of the automation. And we're going to try to find anywhere where it would say the limit. So let's try to put limit here in the search. And here we go, rate limit in the documentation. So the rate limit between the APIs, it's going to be 600 requests per minute. So that means that we can run 600 leads per minute through this automation. So then we want to come here to lead. We're going to click on create lead, which is the one that we want to do. We're going to copy the URL like I was telling you before, right? We're going to copy that. We're going to put the batch size here now. It's 600 per minute. So I'm going to do 300 in my batch just to be safe. And then I'm going to put the loop. And the loop is going to be very simple. I want to hit Instantly's API endpoint. So I'm going to put HTTP request. I'm going to go to imports URL. I'm going to paste it. Then I'm going to replace the token. So I'm just going to put bearer and I'm going to put my token in here. And then I'm going to be done. From here, all I'm going to do is just send the data for the list. So I'm going to put the first name of the lead, for example, which then let me select Google Sheets. I'm going to copy the first name in here. Oops. So this is going to be actually called first name, and I'm going to paste the value in there. So let's say like that. And the name, let's just make sure that it is actually first name that we add. So it's going to be first name like this. You always have to cross-check for the documentation. So first name, and then I'm going to be adding all of the other data that I want to send to my list. So let's say that would be email, and I'm going to copy the email from here, right? Let's confirm if it is actually email that you write. Yes, it is email, and you have to send it as a string. So then we are good to go. We're going to do all of that, and at the end, we're going to click on add option, and we're going to do batching. And this is extremely, extremely important that you follow. So for the batch, remember that we're sending 300. We're going to send 300, but we want a small batch in between each. So I want to put this to 200 MS, okay? And that is just to make sure that we're never going to hit any of the limits. So if we're going to do 300 per batch, and that's 200 MS, let's see how much that's going to be. 300 x 200 MS, that's going to be 60. So that's 60 seconds right here to run through this 300. That is actually too slow. We could actually make this then 600. And then we make the batch up here also 600. Now that I think about it, that would make even more sense. And it's going to run then all of the 600 per minute so we don't hit any API limits. From here, what's going to do, I like to notify my front end. So I would do a Postgres update. So just execute or insert a row in a table, then notify my front end, and I would just loop in batches. And once it is done, so let me just do a loop in batches. And once it's done, I'll just like to notify myself on Slack. Right? It is done. So I could just send a message like this. So done, sent my message, I notify myself. If there was an error now, so how would we solve that? All I would do is come here in settings, I would put on error, continue using error output, and then I'll create an error handler here, which perhaps could be a Slack notification, and it could be, so let me send a message, or perhaps it could be another wait period. So I would put here wait, meaning that I hit my API endpoint probably. So I would wait for, let's say, 10 seconds, and then I would continue to add my batch, right? So this is one of the ways that you could be setting this up. Actually, this node right here would be connected to my HTTP request. And that is how you set up an automation that from beginning to end will do all of the things we talked about in the beginning. Scrape all of the vendors, upload everything to a spreadsheet, and from the spreadsheet, add everything to instantly, or SmartLead, or anywhere else that you want to do. And if you want to create a front end, you could be doing with these tools right here. I hope this was helpful to you. And if it was, I would recommend that you consider checking this other video recorded on other automations I set up. And if you want a video on how I would set up all of those step by step like I did here, feel free to comment down below and I'll definitely consider that. Thanks so much, and I will see you in the next one.